That's an interesting question. It is what you think it is.
I lost my train of thought. Sorry, can you repeat that again?
We'll cut that part out.
Okay.
You may have to work for it. May not be comfortable. It might not happen right away, but you can have it there.
Okay, welcome everyone to Stable Stories. This is an official podcast series of the Stallion Chronicle. This is episode 2, which is called Tunnel Vision, featuring Miss Marci J. So before we begin, Miss Marci, would you mind giving us an introduction of your journey as your chosen profession, basically?
Sure. So I've always known that I wanted to work in education, work with kids and families, and when I got to the college part of my journey, before that I was volunteering, working with kids and families with special needs and working at summer camps, and I really liked that. But then when it came time to go to college, I didn't take the traditional teaching path. It wasn't something that I was interested in. And so I actually created my major called Children in Society, and I compared some school systems and the inequity of the perpetuation of some inequities that folks have based on their schooling. And then from there, I started working with caregivers, and now I currently work with an organization that focuses on training caregivers and providing other benefits for caregivers. And I work in the technology aspect of that, delivering our curriculum on our technical platform, and any other technical releases I help to coordinate with the rest of the organization. So it's kind of merging all of the things that I really was interested in into one big space.
Is it okay if I ask why you are not interested in pursuing like a full education degree?
Yes. When I really like learning, and I felt like me growing up, the way that I was being taught, I didn't connect with it. It was a lot of memorization and some other things, and I was having a really hard time making a connection between real world application and what we were learning, and that was just my experience. And through that, working with kids and families with special needs and other kids and families, I became really interested in more of the social aspect of education, and wanted to explore that a little bit more. The teaching certification programs were very focused on teaching to a particular curriculum, and that was interesting to some degree, but it didn't make my heart jump. It wasn't something I really looked forward to doing, and so I had to do some self-discovery to figure out what that was and how I could make the things that I do for my living really fit with what I was interested in.
What would you say are some parts of the educational curriculum that you were not fully satisfied with?
That's an interesting question. It was more the teaching to a particular curriculum and not being able to stray from that, and being graded on the ability to take a particular test in a particular way that I wasn't interested in, and I didn't connect with it, and I thought other people might not also connect with it. So I really liked the opportunity of being able to support people that may feel the same way that I did growing up in the school systems.
Can I ask, in what ways did you support these people that were not filling to the needs of the curriculum?
More of the social aspect of it, and asking why, and the critical thinking around it. One of my favorite opportunities that I had in high school, and I think this was about when I realized that I that there was a different opportunity out there for me. I just had to find it. We had a journalism assignment that I took, and the half of the room, half of the students were given pro whatever it was. I don't remember the topic, and the other half was con. So here's the benefit of moving forward in this direction. Here's the negative of moving forward in this direction. And then we were supposed to give a presentation. We got into the classroom and our teacher said, okay, you're gonna switch now. And so I had studied or had prepared to give a presentation on pro, what was good and what was the benefit. And all of a sudden, really quickly, I had to give a presentation in that same classroom on that same day about the negative side of that. And that was when I really felt like I was using my brain in a way that really fit with how I think about things and how I think about the world and how I view the world. And that was the jumping off point for me in that way.
Were you able to do something that is similar to that in your major and later in your career?
Yes. So I was very fortunate to go to a school that had a small program that you could create your own major. And so I created my own major. It was a bachelor degree in concentration. And the title of it was Urban Education, Children and Society. And I had a faculty sponsor that had to sponsor me. I had to write an introductory thesis, why I wanted to move in this direction, and then with the classes and how they related. And then at the end of every semester, I had to write not only did I have to finish those classes, but then I had to write a retrospective on what I learned, did any of my views change? And then at the very end of my bachelor's degree, that was the last thing I did, was write a final paper on what I learned, anything I would change, what I'm looking forward to doing as we move forward.
Would you say that's a direction that you would encourage other students to have?
That's also an interesting question. I think that what's important is finding out what makes you click and pursuing that for your sake, and not because you're following someone else's path that they had planned for you or journey. For me, it was really difficult. Nobody in my family or friends group understood why I didn't pursue education in the way that I had planned. And I had an aunt who was a teacher too, and I was very close to her, and it was really hard to move past that. And I trusted myself enough to know that I was doing what was good for me, but it was really hard, and I wasn't always confident about that. So in that way, would I encourage other people to do what I did? I don't know. Would I encourage you to think about other avenues that might be interesting, or a different approach that you may not have thought of? Absolutely.
I think something that would be relatable to like people that are our age is that you're committed in this path, and then you're scared to diverge from it since like you dedicate yourself so much into it. So would you say as a teenager you also had the same struggles, and how did you overcome that in order to pursue your passion?
I did have the same struggles, and I was conflicted because as much as I loved working with kids and families, I didn't like going to school, and it wasn't something that interested me, and I thought that was just what your experience was supposed to be like. And I was always the one in the classroom that asked the why, and it wasn't always well received. It was more like, just do the thing because that's what you're supposed to do, and that didn't sit well with me. So yeah, I'm not sure I answered your question, but
Okay, well, I feel like choosing your own major, like making your own major, that's sort of, and is unconventional the right word? way to go about your career. I think similar to our theme, television, a lot of us would be too stuck in the path of, point A, go get the high school diploma and then go to college. Do you think you have faced a lot of pressure while pursuing your path?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really needed to think about and continuously ask myself is, what about going into the teaching profession did I really like? And what about it didn't resonate with me? And come to terms with that for myself. It was hard though, because while I was discovering that for myself, I was also trying to be a good daughter and be a good sister and be a good student. And those relationships didn't really understand what I was going through. So that was a little hard for me, because a lot of people at that time of my age in my peer group, they knew exactly what they wanted to do and they were going to go in this direction. And so it was really easy for them. Now looking back, I don't know if they're really doing what they set out to do, so I'm not quite sure. But that also was a little challenging for me. I felt very isolated and very alone in that process. I wasn't encouraged to do that at all.
Actually, I understand that you have actually done some research during your college journey about the difference in opportunities in different learning environments. Is it okay if you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, I can. So the way that things work in the States is the school system, if you go to a public school system, the resources that school gets is based on your taxes. It's based on your the income level of the people who live in that area. So if there is a wealthier group of people who live in that area, the school system is going to have more money. It's going to attract more qualified teachers, have better resources, those sorts of things. There's also the flip side. If that group of people that are living in that community are of lower income, it's going to have lower money going into the school system. And so what I did is studied the difference between going to school in the wealthier resourced space and the less wealthy resource space, and the inequities and the perpetuation of the inequities for those kids and teenagers going through that school system.
Is it okay if I ask the results of those research?
Yeah, it is what you think it is. And so part of it definitely affects how people leave school and what opportunities are in front of them. And there are definitely, what I did learn though, is if you're aware of those inequities, there is a way to be more deliberate about how opportunities are presented to different groups. And it doesn't have to perpetuate the same inequities that it's maybe is designed or not designed to do. So it was a little sad, but also encouraging at the same time, being aware of those things.
Do you think that's something most people that are in these disadvantaged areas, like they don't exactly know about them?
That's correct. Yeah, I don't think people are aware of it. And so that was what I became more passionate about, was community organizing. So when I was done with my bachelor's degree, I really focused on ways to bring a community together and share resources and bring awareness to some of the opportunities that people may not have realized they actually can have or do have. You may have to work for it. It may not be comfortable. It might not happen right away, but you can have it there.
That actually transitioned very well into your current line of work. I understand that you and Mr. Jack actually met at a volunteering service. Is that where sort of you gained your passion for that line of work?
Yes. So Mr. Jack and I met doing a volunteer program in Boston, Massachusetts, and it was a lot of community organizing. I was very lucky to work at a school that served the biggest bilingual population in the state of Massachusetts, and we served over, I think at that time it was over 11 languages, and bringing people from different cultures together who didn't speak the same language was something that was really inspiring to me. And it reinforced the humanity and the human connection and the meaning of connecting with people. And you don't have to speak the same language if you care about the community in the same way.
I think human connectivity and the celebrations of differences between two groups of people are actually something that is not, valued in our current state of society, and maybe that's something that's not really talked about. What would you say are the most prevalent issues in having this really big systemic issue in our everyday society?
It's an interesting question. I think that it showcases that no matter what, we all have the same humanity and concept, like together in concept, and there will always be people and things and activities and entities that are going to try to divide us or divide people, and it takes a lot of energy and effort and dedication, or I guess more deliberate action, to dispel those distractions so that people can stay connected. And so you need to keep doing it. It's practice, but it needs to be an ongoing thing and not just, hey, we did this one thing this year and we're done, we checked a box. It's not checking a box. You need to really live and embody that sort of interest.
Yeah, I think given the course of human history, there are issues that are so deeply rooted in our society that is kind of impossible to eradicate. And more so, it does kind of break one's spirit if you're not passionate about advocating for something like that. So I understand that you actually have experience working with youth. Do you often see this like spark of them wanting to advocate for these issues while working with them?
I do. Not everywhere, and it's not for everyone. But I think having a curious way about how you interact with other people or places that you go really can help bridge that gap and sort of fight back some of the things that you're talking about. But again, it's something you embody. It's something that you can't just check a box for that. And there's a lot of people who want people to be divided. There's a lot of entities out there that benefit from the division. So really being thoughtful about how you go about building community is really important.
I think the part of introducing someone to different people of different culture is quite important in the developmental ages. That kind of brings back onto the education curriculum. Well, personally, I've been wondering about, will there ever be like a perfect educational system in which people don't have like a one-dimensional view of people from other nations and the harmful effect that would bring with dehumanizing them to one opinion? Is that something that issue that you have been pondering about as well, Ms. Marci?
Yes, and that is also really difficult because we all suffer differently and we all have different challenges. And when you take a step back and generally can look at those challenges from, hey, this was a challenge for you, wasn't a challenge for me. It's a lot easier to stay connected than if you're looking very macro at that and going, oh, that's you have a really hard time at math. Well, that's easy for me, but maybe English is really hard for me. Like, we all struggle in different ways. Whether there's going to be, if that's going to be infiltrated in the education system, ideally I would love that. I don't know if that's possible in the way that our current society is, with some of the, the internet and news comes so fast, and people are learning in different ways, not just from the education system. So there's a lot of things to consider in that space. What do you think?
Well, I personally, that train of thought always leads me to the fact that we're so connected as a species, and the fact that we can receive information from the other side of the world the second that it happens. I think maybe that might lead to just too much negative news that push onto someone, which is not good for their mental health perhaps, and it might like desensitize them to I guess traumatic events and dehumanize some certain groups of people. Actually, I have been wondering about that problem. Do you think it would be better if humanity stayed within certain communities of people instead of like a huge, well-rounded, well-connected world, basically?
Can we have both?
Can we?
I know. I think that's a really interesting question. I'd like to think that we can have both of those, but I'm not sure. I don't know how we would take everyone's experiences and culture in different communities and bring it all under one coordinated space that spans languages and distance in that way. I don't know what that would look like.
I think in terms of discovery, a very globalized, well-connected world would be very interesting to the human mind by traveling to, across seas and visiting different civilizations. But at the same time, that does expose us to a lot of differing opinions, I feel like. And no society would ever be perfect. And I feel like certain groups of people would like to antagonize other groups of people with things that are not necessarily true in order to manipulate sort of a certain group of citizens in that area.
And I think they could leverage that for justification for doing that really easily. Yeah.
Actually, the globalization of human society actually does bring up another point about the growing industry of technology. Would you mind giving us a very relevant opinion about the current state of the AI industry?
Oh gosh. So I have a love-hate relationship with AI. I think that I use AI and I use artificial intelligence to help me in my day-to-day work. I use it to help me organize my thoughts, do certain kinds of research. But the one thing that I also do is take what it spits out and I look at it, I critically think about it, and maybe I use it as a jumping off point, not as the end game. And that is, I'm not justifying my use of it, but I feel like the challenge we have with AI is the lack of critical thinking that goes into, hey, is it telling me the truth? Is it telling me, or just telling me what it thinks I want to hear? And that's where I think it gets really dangerous, in especially folks who are growing their minds and trying to figure out who they want to be and what they want to do and what sparks joy in them. I think AI does a really big disservice for that.
Yeah, I think critical thinking is a challenge that our generation would have to address at some point. And I think it does make people more willing to believe misinformation.
Well, the other thing that is happening is everything now on the internet can be changed. And like, I still have old videos. Like, I have my videos, I have my cassette tapes, I have my old music on records, and I have them on, so I know none of that because I can tangibly hold it. But what scares me about the future of AI and just where we're going is the changing narrative that you can have, and it's almost like you doubt your own memory and you doubt what your truth is. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge is like, what is the narrative? Well, it depends who put up an article yesterday or today about blah, 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 whatever topic it is.
I think personally my biggest issue with AI is the fact that it takes a lot of jobs from people, which one would argue is good, because even though a lot of people are struggling in this time period, later on that will open up to new possibilities. But one thing about capitalism is that these AI companies are sort of owned by the big brands, and there are just certain groups of people that have all the power. And the problem with AI is that it gives the rich the tool for more information, while the poor it kind of just gets rid of the stepping stone for them to proceed onto higher hierarchies, like ranks in society.
Are you saying because of the AI is taking over the entry level space, or?
I would say that in some parts would be true, but it's more so also the mental aspect of it would potentially just ruin several generations of just critical thinking in general, and not a lot of job opportunities would not be available to them. Would you say that's something that people with higher power are aware of and are exploiting?
Oh, I think they're very aware of it. And the other thing is, machine learning is not a new concept. I know we think that AI came about like 5 years ago. We've been doing machine learning for years and years. And I think that what you're talking about is more taking advantage of machine learning to create this artificial intelligence space for that type of, for lack of a better word, elite control. And so not everyone has access to that level of control, and that definitely can affect the workplace.
I also think it's the fact that AI is so pushed in our face. Like, every service sort of uses AI, so it's kind of hard to stick to your core values if you do have a negative view of AI. Do you have any advice on how one would deal with being challenged about their core values?
Well, first of all, I don't know if this answers your question, but AI is not right. It is not right. I don't know how many times, if you put something in AI, check it out. You got to validate, check the source. Even if you put, cite your sources, go to that source, check your source. check another source as well, and trying to find that trusted source that you can rely on, I think is really important. It's hard though, the world's moving really quickly, and the speed of the internet has made that so difficult to change. And I know that in my world, sometimes I work with some developers and they will test their code in AI to see if it pops out what they need it to pop out, especially if they're learning new code and it's not right, and then AI wants you to correct it. So it wants you to do the work to make it smarter. And participating, I think not participating in that part of it could be one avenue. Really thinking about AI as not the end all be all, but just another tool in your toolbox, and this is how you use it, just like you use something else.
I think the rate of which the AI industry is growing is also sort of a reflection of how we as a society is moving in a direction that should be scary. What would you say should be the most prevalent issues that teenagers our age should be aware about in our current state of the world?
I think not being spoon-fed how you're supposed to think based off of that, and really challenging. If something doesn't make sense, something doesn't sit well, trust your gut. It probably is. There's probably a reason for that, whatever that is.
I think also given the current state of everything right now, it's hard to find sort of a hope for the future. Would you say that there has been a lot of talk about the tipping point in which we as a society unanimously think, oh, we got to do something about this? Do you think you would believe in something like that? And then
yeah, my own personal belief, it's not based off of any sort of research that I've done, but I think that AI is going to hit its bubble point in the next 3 to 5 years. And similar to how we had the tech bubble, where everything was tech, and then we reached this bubble point where there's just no more that we can do with it. I really believe that it's not going to be able to keep up with the way that society is moving. Let's just move that there.
Could I ask you to elaborate on what's your meaning behind AI not keeping up with society?
I think that it's grown too fast for its own good, and there's still so many challenges with machine learning that have not been addressed, and at some point it's gonna outrun its viability, its usability, because it's just going to be inundated with information. It's going to become a information swamp, and you're not going to know how to get anything from it because the information's coming so quickly, and you can only organize as fast as you're getting that information.
So what you're essentially saying is that AI would be too advanced for humans to continuously update it to current state?
It's getting so much information that it's going to spit out wrong things. It's going to connect the dots incorrectly based off of cherry picking the wrong information, that people are going to stop using it without challenging it. Right now, no one challenges it, right?
Well, do you think, which event would you think will happen first? We giving us so much information that it does not know how to correlate different events, or it getting out of our control and somehow doing some damage to...
I lean on the side that it's going to there's going to be too much information. It's not going to know what to do. and it will become an untrustworthy tool to use without human intervention or human translation. And maybe that's the optimist in me. I don't know.
Do you think when that happens, a lot of people would have trouble with navigating everyday interactions? Or
Yeah, people have trouble now doing that. So I do think so. We're not used to interacting in that way, and there's no advantage right now to interacting with it in any other way than how we are.
I think the rate at which AI, your prediction with how AI would eventually run its course and will, do you think that we'll leave AI sort of in the past as we progress as a species?
I don't know that if it's gonna go away, but I think people are gonna stop making it the end all be all to how things are. And I mean, there's certain things that AI can't do that only a human can do. Part of the human condition is having relationships and connecting, and AI can't do those things. It can't understand nuance. It can't understand slang. It can't understand how to respond to that. And that's its biggest downfall. But I don't think people are ready to accept that right now because of all the good it's doing, the good it's supposed to be doing. And listen, I think machine learning and automation in certain contexts is really important and really good. But I also think that with everything that you do, you need to be a little critical about the impact that it's having. And right now, unfortunately, we haven't caught up to understanding the downstream impact of what something like AI and the way it's prevalently used in our society. We haven't gotten that far yet to catch up to that. But I think we will in the next 3 to 5 years. And then I don't know what's going to happen then.
I actually think AI was the start of which we started having problems with human connectivity. I feel like maybe it's sort of an acceleration of the progress and building off of existing technological applications. Would you say, human connectivity, AI, and other social platforms would be substitutions for actual human interactions, but it's not a full doesn't give the necessary benefits. So would you say that would still be a problem in society even after?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think, and we're already seeing the effects of that, and the lack of empathy and the lack of curiosity, the not wanting to take the time to learn something or to practice something. It's a lot easier to ask a question, spit out an answer, and use that.
Yeah, I think apathy and the lack of curiosity it is a pretty prevalent issue in society, and maybe a part of the reason is because of the globalization of human civilization. There's just so much information coming at you at once. I feel like maybe your system tend to be a bit numb after that, and that's especially a big problem right now. Going back to your work with the educational curriculum, would you say there's something to be done about this issue in order to sort of bring it back?
It's interesting. I forget now who I was talking to, one of you. I was watching a podcast a couple months ago, and there was a woman who was talking about that, right now in the education system, there's a lot of talk about, and in the and in the corporate world and everything is, how do you know if something's AI? And so what app are we using to figure out if someone's using AI or if they're, copying, pasting really quickly and they're not typing and those sorts of things. And she posed a different challenge. She did not have an answer, and I don't have an answer either. But I thought it was an interesting thing to think about, which is, why are we spending all this time trying to figure out how to prevent people from using a tool, or how to have gotcha moments if people are going to be using this tool? And why are we not spending more energy and effort thinking about how do we think about education as we move forward, knowing that this tool is there, and how to responsibly use the tool? And I mean, that would take a lot of time to think about and to change, but it definitely, it's complex, it's complicated. It's not like, oh, we're gonna have an answer and then we can implement it tomorrow, but it definitely is something different to think about. And for me, at least, I've been thinking about that, and I have no answer as to what that implementation would look like, but it is interesting. And I don't know in our lifetime if we will see any change there. Because if you think about education, it really was created back in the day to train a workforce to do a certain thing. And what we're asking education to do is to incorporate some soft skills like your communication, your empathy, some other things into education. And some people don't benefit from that. And that is where the rub is going to happen, I think.
I think that sort of, maybe this issue is just sort of a huge indication that there has been problems within the education system the way before AI was introduced. Of course, a lack of regulation around it for students should be addressed, I think. But I think a part of what you said is that the education system is not really catered towards the students, rather it's catered towards the nation itself, right? They're trying to train workers, not critical thinkers.
Yeah,
perhaps.
It's focused on the outcome and not the process to get to the outcome and the impact of that process. Again, in my opinion.
But I feel like right now that system is also not working, considering the process of the amount of like financial help sort of thing that you need to apply to college, and the hardship that you must endure to actually get a job afterwards. So it's sort of like the system that we set up, it's catered towards the nation, is not really working as well. Would you think that would have negative effects, and we will slowly continue do the downward process of going back to sort of a student catered nation?
I don't know. That's there's no money in that approach that you have. There's right, like there's no money in doing that. There's no for in terms of the outcome. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. But I think the people who have the money and have the power want to keep having the power and keep having the money. And that's one challenge to overcome.
But more so, do you think the process in which they're trying to establish wealth for them is sort of like a self-destructive progress? Since the difference between the top 1% and the bottom 20% is like so large now, would you say that eventually education would be so unaffordable that the system no longer works and they no longer have workers, laborers?
I think that they will always have enough resources for laborers in a particular space.
Okay.
I think that the creativity is what will be jeopardized in doing that. And the will of the person doing that labor.
Right. But do you think we're just going to head towards this destructive path continuously?
I've had this debate with my friends and my coworkers a lot, and I like to stay optimistic, but it sure looks in that direction, unless something significant changes. And for me, in my opinion, that all starts in your local community, local culture, sharing the differences, celebrating differences, seeing people as people and not as a number. It really helps with that, because once you name a human, you've made that connection because you've given that person a name. And if you don't have that, it's a lot easier to treat humans like numbers, and you don't have to have that empathy or that same type of connection or communication.
Yeah. I think that also ties back to the problem of just general digital devices making it more easy for people to see other groups of people as just a number, and making events that should be really tragic sort of just like an everyday thing for them to see.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can pay for views, you can pay for likes, you can pay for all those things. And so not everything you're seeing on the internet anyway or on social media is actually the truth. And I forget again who I was talking to earlier today, but I was so disappointed when I really liked a new song that came out. And then I found out it was AI generated, and I was like heartbroken that they have this infamous infiltrated what I consider to be very sacred. Music is very important to me, and do what you will with documents or papers, but don't touch that level of creativity, especially if I can't know. And especially in the early AI stages, you could tell what was a doctored picture, but now you can't. It's really difficult to do that. That scares me.
I think as a society, even though AI has advanced a lot of our medical necessities, it really does make sort of the human life more like mundane. For them to create music, for them to create art, things that are supposed to contain like human soul, that are supposed to be representative of who we are as a species. I saw like a quote once where it's like, I want AI to do the dishes and clean my house so I can do writing and art. But instead AI are doing writing and art, and I'm doing the dishes.
That's hard.
Yeah. Even though AI does have made medical breakthroughs, do you think, in your opinion, we would be better off without having ever touched it?
I think it's like anything else. Do I think that screens or cell phones are bad? No, I live in Washington State, and some of my family, including my niece and nephews who are school age, they live in Sweden. And so I love the fact that I can WhatsApp with them whenever I want. It doesn't replace me sitting on the couch and having a conversation with them, but it makes it that much easier for me to do that. So I'm not a hater of AI. I'm not a hater of cell phones or screens or social media. I think, again, it's, you have a tool. How are you going to use that tool and being responsible with that tool? You give, I don't know if, well, that's not a good analogy, but if you give someone a hammer, you're going to, you need to know how to use the tool or you can hurt somebody. So you're not going to take that hammer and start hitting people with it or that sort of thing. You use it to build. And so with that kind of analogy, use the tool for what it's made for and nothing else.
I think that's actually a very good analogy. It's the fact that digital devices and AI are mostly unregulated.
Yeah.
That is bringing up the issue. And it's the fact that a lot of the people that are using it are not aware of the effects that it might have on them as a person. Like maybe in the moment they see it as a tool that can be utilized to make their life easier, but would you say that using this tool would make someone's, I guess, more unappreciative of everyday life and everyday culture interactions?
It doesn't have to. It depends what you're expecting from it and what the outcome is that you're expecting. But I think there's a responsible way to use AI as a tool. And, similarly, cell phones, I don't know if you all are of the age where, but I grew up without a cell phone. We didn't have cell phones, it wasn't a thing. And I was talking to my friend a couple weeks ago about how hard it is now to wait in line and for something without looking at my cell phone. The minute I have a free moment, I take out my cell phone and I'm, oh, what's going on and who's doing what and this, that, and the other. And I'm trying to make a more conscious effort to not pull out my cell phone and just wait in line. Just sit there and observe what's happening and the interactions that are happening around you. So in that comparison, I think the same thing is true of AI. And the more you use it in a different way, it could affect the outcome, but it doesn't have to if you're conscious about it.
Would you say that there would be sort of like a tipping point in which enough people are aware of the consequences, in which we do establish regulations on something like AI?
I don't know that people are gonna make that connection. I don't think enough people will make that connection to be able to push that through. I think that, again, what we were talking about before, it doesn't make money. People want money.
But would you say that in order to make money, there will be certain consequences of not regulating that would prevent them from making money?
Down the road, that's, yes. And that's, I go back to what I was saying earlier, that I think people are going to start to realize that AI is not the end all be all. It is wrong. It could steer you in the wrong direction and might not put as much stock in it. But at the same time, one of the really interesting things that AI can do is take a big amount of data and spit out an analysis. It doesn't mean the analysis is right, but if you don't care about being right or wrong and you just want that analysis, you'll get it. Because it can only connect so many data points before it gets confused, and then it won't look at some data points that are actually really important to consider in making a decision or figuring out a direction that you want to go with something.
I think the AI industry is also, I guess, a reflection, as you said, about people want money. There is a very large unequal distribution of wealth, And I think I saw a statistic once of the top 1% making like 137 times more than the bottom 20%. Do you see any hope in that getting better globally?
It's interesting. I work for a union, and I don't know if folks know what a union is. Do you all know what a union is? Okay. It, in simple terms, it basically advocates for worker rights. So it's the go-between between the employer and the employee. And there's been a steady decline, especially in the States, about unions and union involvement. And part of that has to do with lack of empathy around worker rights. And so if I'm looking at that trend, it doesn't give me a lot of hope, unfortunately. However, what gives me hope is people like you all who are asking the tough questions and being reflective on your experience and wanting it to be different and experimenting with how it can be different.
I think recently there has been a lot of backlash on specifically empathy around minimum wage workers. Yeah, but I have to say it does not give me a lot of hope. Do you think protests in general in the current age are sort of the only thing that those of us who want to advocate for an issue like this that works?
Yes, and building community and whatever you can to bring things back to the humanity and like what the human condition is all about. We're meant to live and love and take care of each other and create things, and really bringing it back to that. But again, you're going to have people, entities, situations out there that are not going to want you to do that. So it's going to take energy, it's going to take effort, it's going to take deliberate thinking on how you can do that and move forward. And which I think is probably the hardest part. But what I think the protests and things like that do, it also builds community because it showcases, hey, I'm not the only one that feels this way. In fact, 1 million other people who don't even live in my community also think this way. And that's really inspiring to me.
I think, yeah, that's one of the positives of having global connectivity is that you can see other people that have your mindset, and you can find community in that way. But yeah, I think it is hard in order to build a community where you're supporting each other and then building something like that in a world where sort of all the guys up there, they own literally everything. They own every brand, they own would you say that's like the end goal of what people, the top 1%, are trying to aim for?
God, I don't know what their end goal is. I feel like the goal post keeps moving on that one. It becomes more and more and more, and nothing's enough. That's a tough one. I often ask myself, to what end are we doing all of these things for? I don't know that answer. It is interesting thinking, I have a friend who is teaching himself how to make games. He wants to make games online, and he's starting to create these monsters, and he is using AI for the actual graphics for the monsters. And he's conflicted because if he were to have, he had to make 26 cards, I think it was, and he used AI to create the monsters the way that he wanted it to look, and it took like a day. If he had drawn them and done them himself online, because he doesn't have the skills, the art skills to do that, it would have taken so much longer. And so, him and I are having a conversation about, again, how do you use AI responsibly for what you're looking to do and still respect the art and the creativity of the human spirit, which is hard to do.
I think it is quite a delicate balance between the two. And I think what makes it especially hard is, again, it's being constantly pushed towards you, and there's always going to be a disadvantage to those who don't use it and those who do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not often acknowledged as well.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do you like? What's your biggest concern for where you are now and thinking about your next 5 to 10 years as it relates to AI? What's your biggest concern about that?
Concern? I guess one side of it would be the environmental problem that it does cause. And there's something to be said about that too. It's the fact that these data centers are built in areas in which people depends on the resources that it uses. It sort of just like takes resources. It gives priority to these centers of the resources that people in those areas need. Other than that, I think it's just the aspect of it causing people to not care about certain aspects of life that should have made human life more enjoyable, I think. I'd say AI as a tool, it does create the sense that life, you have a goal to accomplish and you must use this tool and then you must do all these things, but in reality, I think life is more about appreciating other people's art, other people's music, creating your own stuff from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it really takes away from the fact that the art of doing something and feeling accomplished by it. Would you relate to that as well?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And we didn't talk about the climate aspect of it, but that's huge, and the displacement of folks who live in the communities that are in those areas and what the downstream impact is, and weighing the pros and the cons there for that. Is it worth it? And I think some people, this is the challenge that we have, is I think some people will say it is worth it, and I would say it's not worth it.
It's more so of the fact, it's just like all of these issues. We have discrimination against certain groups of people. We have this AI issue, and then that leads on to the environmental issue. And it just seems that I feel like humanity don't have the unity and don't have the empathy in order to solve these issues until the point in which it affects wealth, basically.
The money.
Yeah. Do you think you have a big hope? Do you have hope for this tipping point to happen at some point, and we as a species wakes up from?
I do. I have, like I said, I'm an optimist. I do have hope in that that can happen. I think that all of you and where you're at will play a big part in that. My generation is, and other generations, I don't think we didn't have the opportunity to interact and then reflect on it, whereas I think you all have a really key space right now to interact with it the way you are, and then reflecting on that and whatever change needs to happen on how you reflect on it or on how you interact with it and what that means for your communities and culture and that sort of thing.
What would you say would be the most important things that we as students should be aware of in order to fight against the ongoing challenges?
It's gonna be hard. There are enough strong-willed entities out there that don't want to see that diversion of the path. And so it definitely is gonna be something that it won't be easy. Will it be worth it? I think so. And it kind of goes back to the story that I started out with, me going to school and not wanting to be a teacher, but not wanting to be certified in a traditional way. I think that all sums up this conversation a little in that go with your gut and ask questions, be curious. And if something feels wrong, there's likely something there. So try to figure that out, what that is for yourself.
I do think that does correlate back to our theme, tunnel vision, in which many of us do have like a set way in which we want to operate in terms of getting a good grade and then going to do this and then getting a job. Is there any point in your career in which, perhaps in college, perhaps in high school, or in your career, that you have felt like you reached the end of the line, and how have you persevered despite that?
Yeah, in my current job, I've been working in my current job for quite some time, and I've played a few roles, and I'm not a technical person by nature. If you had told me 20 years ago that I'd be where I am on the technical team for this organization, I wouldn't believe you, because I don't consider myself to be that technical. And but I had hit a roadblock where I was doing a lot of front end support, and it just wasn't challenging to me. And so I just started teaching myself, and I said it was for my customers that I was working with, how to use the system and learning the back end so I could help them better use the system that we were asking them to use. And from there, I then worked my way into the tech team, and I am the only person on my team. There's 25 of us, and everyone else has a technical degree, or they knew they wanted to be in tech, or they've been coding for their entire life, that sort of thing. And so it was really intimidating for me to sit at that table and feel like I had value. And what was really interesting is constantly being reminded that the value that I bring to the table is exactly what I bring to the table, which is my experience with customers and who I am, and that I actually am technical, just not in a traditional way that I thought I was. And so trying to see yourself outside of what you think is expected can also be something to, try and figure out what works for you in that space.
I think there's something to be said about the title of a degree that people put emphasis on. Yeah. I feel like too much, perhaps. Sometimes I guess we would forget that that's just a title. Sometimes people who don't have a degree would have the experience to do so, perhaps even more than someone that does have a degree. And actually, I've read an article about the growing issue of people that does have master's degrees not being able to find jobs even after they had their education. would you say that would be a cause of being too focused on the just material of what you're learning, but not applying them onto everyday society life?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting question. I, again, forget who I was talking to earlier today, but I was talking about my friend who is a speech pathologist, and she went and got her master's 10 years after she graduated and got her bachelor's degree. Everyone else in her master's program had just come out of college. And so they were reading about people and studies and research articles that my friend had already been able to apply in her work. And so she was able to connect with the material in a very different way than these folks who didn't have that real world experience. So I do think that there is something to be said about having the real world experience as well. Getting a master's degree and not being able to find a job that's also really challenging, and there's a lot of factors to that. Some people, they don't want to pay for someone who's had a master's degree, so they don't want to pay the salary, so they'd rather pay someone lower than that. But I also think it depends how they apply what they learned. And you can't just sit on your laurels and say, well, I have a master's in this or a PhD in this, or, you really need to be able to explain what that means to you and what the value it brings to you, to which you will bring to the community, the society, or whatever you're interacting with.
And that connects with being genuinely passionate about what you're majoring in as well.
It depends. There is a level of being passionate, of course, but passions can change, and it's okay. That's what life's about. You try things out, you see if it works for you, and if it doesn't, it's about that connecting with yourself and having that opportunity to reflect and move on. But again, some people might question that, or are you sure? And then you start doubting yourself, and it's really having that trust in yourself. This is your life, and you're the one living it. I'm not living it. I have to be happy with my choices and how I live with my choices.
I think maybe some people don't really enjoy what they're doing because they're not, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for them to branch out and see something that they're potentially more passionate about, more so. So is it okay if you tell us more about your college experience and how you were able to sort of branch out and see what interests you?
Yeah, when I went down this route, my faculty advisor said, are you sure that you want to study this and learn these things? And of course I do. It's really, interesting. And she said, are you prepared to lose friendships? Are you prepared for people not to support you? And I didn't know what she meant. And I said, of course I am. I can do anything. And it wasn't until, 15 years ago that I was like, oh, that's what she meant. Okay. But for me, I had to trust my gut and just keep moving forward the best that I knew how to. Again, it's my life, and I'm the one that defines what value I bring to another person, to another organization, to another community. I'm responsible for that. And I took that responsibility very seriously. But, I think going back to what you were saying is some people don't know that there's other things out there. And so they don't even know that that's an option to feel passionate about something. And some people aren't interested in feeling passionate. Some people are like, I call it a job. I'm just going to do my job. I'm going to clock in, I'm going to clock out, and that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to, whatever interests me or whatever, and that works for them. It didn't work for me. And so I had to make that change for myself.
Would you say having a mindset of, hey, I'm going to do this thing, if it doesn't work out, I'll do this, and taking risks would be better than overanalyzing, I suppose?
I'm going to answer that in a little different of a way. I think that you should expect to fail. You should expect to do something wrong. You should expect that something's not going to work out, and that's all part of the journey. It doesn't mean you failed at the journey. It means that that's what happened. And a lot of times when things don't work out, and I know this sounds cliche, but when things don't work out, it's because it's leaving room for something else to work out that makes more sense. But at the time, I wanted this degree, or I wanted to apply to this college, or I wanted to try doing this, and that didn't work out. It feels like a failure, but it's part of the experience. And so I know I didn't answer your question, but I think that's the mindset that will take you really far.
I do agree that having a positive, not letting failures define who you are as a person is really important. But I think, especially currently with how expensive education is globally, I feel like a lot of teens would get trapped in the mindset of, hey, this has to work or else I'm going to be homeless, something like that.
Is that a concern? Is that a prevalent concern of folks?
I'd say maybe not that extreme, but I think more so a lot of teens are starting to get concerned, especially in like less wealthy families, in which, oh, this has to work, or else my family's gonna pay. Or would you say you have any advice for people who have this issue?
It seems dire. There is something out there. It might not be at that time. And to stay optimistic, I guess. Yeah.
Actually, a lot of the teachers here, especially, I'm not sure how much I should say, but they do have personal struggles, and like personally, what they told me was that there will always be an avenue. So even if one thing doesn't work out, there will always be something that you can work on. Is that something that you relate to, Ms. Marci?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, another cliche is when one door shuts, another door opens. But I really believe that that's true. And I'm not trying to say that don't be sad, don't be angry, no, that's frustrating. You wanted something, own that disappointment, be frustrated, and then move on. I think the problem happens when people stay in that frustration, disappointed space, and then it becomes really doom and gloom. That becomes really hard to unravel from the deeper you go down that space.
Is it okay if I ask about the different career paths that you have taken after graduating from college?
Yeah, I ran some youth programs out of local community centers, and then I became a caregiver for a family whose child had special needs, Cornelia de Long syndrome, and which meant that she was basically nonverbal and developmentally physically she's aging, but developmentally she would stay at about like 4 or 5. And she now is 34 years old and thriving. In her and she lives in a group home, and her parents live nearby, and she's is nonverbal, but we figured out ways to communicate. And from there, that's how I got into the work that I'm doing now with caregivers, is being part of that community, and now that's led me to the job that I have right now. So it definitely was like a kind of pathway, and I wouldn't change anything. It was exactly what I needed to do and how I needed to do it. And I have no regrets not getting my teaching certificate.
What would you say are some of the most important things that you have learned during this journey, and something that should be emphasized to teenagers, something that we should be aware of?
It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to not do what someone else wants you to do. I think self-reliance is really important, and the ability to self-reflect on your experiences is really important. However you do that, whatever process that looks like for you, is equally as important as the other decisions that you're making around which school to go to, which class to take, which job to apply for. I think they all connect together.
I understand that currently you're working with an organization that is fighting for Medicaid? Is
Yes.
that how you would
Yeah.
say it?
Medicaid and Medicare cuts.
So how has the process been so far?
It's an ongoing battle. Every year we have to go back to the government to fight for the rights of low-income families that don't have enough to survive, and it's exhausting work. It is worth it, and the community that it has built is very inspiring, and I can't compare any other experience in my life to this in particular. One of the things that I did is I worked on the Obama campaign, and what we did is we went to people's houses and we talked to them about what it would mean for them to not have the support of either Medicaid, Medicare, the government funding, what it would mean to their lives. And we actually shared their stories in Washington, D.C. And we had some of them fly to Washington, D.C. to meet with their representatives. And it is such a powerful experience, and to hear these people's they're not numbers anymore. They're actual people. There's actual impacts to the decisions that other people are making who don't have to experience this. One of the legislators said, "I don't understand why it's so hard for you all to get health care. Take your kid to the doctor when he's sick." And they can't. They don't have insurance, and the doctor costs a lot of money. And so I think it really put things into perspective for those people who aren't experiencing those same hardships, and especially for those people who are making the decisions, who are sitting at the table, who are saying, yeah, this is going to be cut, this isn't what we're going to support anymore. And it was such a meaningful experience for the caregivers that I worked with, to be able to share their story. And it was heart-wrenching. And there were a lot of tears in sharing their story, but there was also a lot of laughter. There were a lot of hugs, and there was a lot of community support that came from that work. And that, to me, is the crux of a lot of what we're talking about today, the humanity of it, and there are impacts to decisions, and some people need to know what those impacts are. And some people don't care. So we did also have legislators who slammed the door in our face and said, okay, whatever, and didn't care. But to the ones that we were able to connect with, it made the difference.
I think there is something really powerful about seeing in person the impact that you have made. Again, like going back to like social media, digital devices, you don't exactly, it's just a number. So it kind of exemplifies that feeling of pride when you actually do see your impact in person. Also, I do agree with the fact that a lot of people in power simply just do not know about the struggle of current day, everyday people, and that is a causation to a lot of the issues that we have today. But I think there's something to be said about remaining positive, because there is also a positive side to everything that has been happening. It's like there's this joke that I have with my friend about life being an oscillating sine function. There's always positives and negatives, and you can choose which one that you want to focus on.
Yeah.
And
I truly believe in that.
I think that's a good place to wrap up our podcast.
Do we want any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
So recently with the Trump administration in the US, the Trump administration has actually decreased a lot of the funding towards the Affordable Care Act and towards Obamacare, and generally just looks down on Obamacare overall. So how does your organization and your community fight against that?
It's a really good question. When we first were working on the Affordable Care Act, we had to come to a compromise. It wasn't exactly what we wanted, and when I say we, I don't mean myself, but it was a way that we thought would be attainable for people who are against it. And now what it has turned into is a lot of people have grown dependent on it, and I think that with the Trump administration, the downstream impact is not something that's in focus right now. And I think that there's a skewed sense of who it is supporting, and that is not fair in that way. I think that there's a lot of immigration is another big topic, and I think that there's some conflation between immigration and things like the Affordable Care Act and having those resources available to families in the States. What we're trying to do is keep the pressure on and keep the fight going. And so we're not letting up. We have been preparing for this for years. And we knew it was gonna happen. And so there are some really smart people who have been thinking about this for years, who are writing a lot of really complicated law briefs and pushing those forward in the meantime to try to stop some of these cuts, and also to educate the public on what the impact of some of these cuts are and what is actually in those bills. The Trump administration, and I'll say this with the other administrations as well, it's not just the Trump administration, has done a really good job of confusing the American public and manipulating some of the data points in that way.
What do you mean by data points?
In terms of who it's benefiting or not benefiting, and are they supposed to be in our country or not supposed to be in our country, those sorts of things. And I think that they are using false data points, this is my personal opinion, but using false data points to make connections that just aren't there. But for people who aren't able to research or get the data on their own, it's easy to believe. And that has also, so that's why, part of it is putting pressure on the government itself, but the other part is educating the rest of the states on what it really is, and in plain language, not in confusing doublespeak, but in plain language, and having the facts to back that up.
So before being like more in the medical industry part, right, you were a lot in the education industry. And so my mom is a teacher, and we've actually discussed this a lot on how actually outdated the educational system is, because if you think about it, it hasn't really been properly updated in 150 years, right? And so I wanted to ask, like, what are the curriculums that you have helped established, and like what's the main difference between those and the standard ones that we have in our school system today?
So I've worked within the framework. I don't know if you all know the Montessori method, but Montessori is more about hands-on learning. And so I went to Montessori for a year, and I don't remember, but my mom tells me lots of fun stories. But it's instead of me, the example would be something like, instead of learning fractions, the way that we traditionally learn fractions is actually taking a cup and having 4 small cups, and then putting 4 small cups to make a cup, so that you can understand the real world application to that. What is really challenging in our current state is the current Trump administration has dismantled, for right now, the overarching curriculum involvement. So it's up to the states now how they want to educate the children that live in the states, and that is really difficult and challenging. What you're also finding currently is there's a lot of charter schools that are coming into play. And so, you know what, okay, we're gonna do our own thing, and they still get public funding. They do still have to get accredited in a particular way, but it lends itself to a little bit more creativity for what those curriculum points look like.
Do you think that's better? Do you think if instead of like the US having like a general educational system, that it being up to the state is better? Or like, what do you think the consequences of that would be?
So this is, it's a great question. And I never understood this when I was growing up, because I always wanted to be a teacher, right? And then I'd hear my parents, when I was like 7, 10 years old, I'd hear my parents and their friends talking about politics and education. And I remember being like, wait, you're not in education, you're a business person, you own a restaurant. Like, how, like, what, why are you even talking about this? But that, I think, is what concerns me the most, is that there are people who are sitting at the table making really important decisions about the future education of our children, who have no background in education and don't have the knowledge base of what it takes to work with kids, don't understand child development, and don't understand the impact of those things. That, I think, makes it harder, because everyone thinks they know. I think it goes back to also what we were talking about, is what's the outcome for education? Is it just to spit out laborers, or is it to really learn and be creative and those sorts of things? That by decentralizing that and leaving it up to the states, it will further divide the states even more, and and then also connect states together so they that may have a nefarious purpose to become bigger and almost bully the other smaller states who may not see the same way they do.
And then, like, how do you think, you were talking about AI and how you don't think that it's going to develop to the point where, like, it's going to be like the dot-com bubble, right? And it's eventually going to stop being used, like, every day, and we're going to stop, like, having over-reliance on it, right? And so do you think that the education system should actually change to incorporate AI into it, or not at all?
Not at all. I mean, I don't know, that was my knee-jerk reaction. No, I don't think it has a place in education in that way. Again, in my opinion, there. What do you think?
I think that since AI, I think that for me personally as a student, AI has had like a pretty big impact on me. And right now, I feel like we're given a tool that we don't know how to properly use. And I think that schools need to teach us that. And so I think that it would be actually beneficial to have AI incorporate. By AI being incorporated into educational systems, I don't mean like a robot teaching us, right? Artificial intelligence teaching us. I'm just talking about like how to use it productively and not lose, like you mentioned, the critical thinking factor that it's ruining currently.
Can I actually add on to that point? I think it's the fact that maybe AI maybe the fact that if we can, not having it in education systems at all would be more beneficial in developing critical thinking, but it's the fact that we can't completely eradicate its existence from student life. So maybe we should just like teach the proper regulations of it.
Yeah, and that goes back to, that podcast I referenced where, the woman's like, why are we spending all this time trying to catch people using AI? Let's figure out how do we incorporate that. Again, I don't know what that looks like. I'd love to figure out how to make that happen and what that streamline would look like. I think it can be done. I just don't know how the implementation would work in that space.
I'm gonna let someone else ask questions now.
Anybody else have a question?
I actually have a question.
Oh, okay.
For Coco? Great.
For both of you.
All right.
So, you mentioned that like I'm gonna try to like phrase it in the most articulate way possible, but I don't think I can. So you mentioned that you lean more towards like the social aspect of education, growing up because you faced like certain like inconveniences in school where you were rejected of your own learning style. Is that correct? So, I think Lola kind of covered this question as well, but you said you are the most in favor of the Montessori education system so far, right? So, from what I know so far, it's mostly like incorporated in like younger ages.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't found any that applies to like high school students. So why do you think it's that way, and do you think it's a good idea to like incorporate it in like high school systems?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of Montessori-esque curriculums out there, and another one is the Waldorf School, which does cater to higher education up to high school, and it's more interdisciplinary than okay, now you're going to study math, and then 4 seconds later, now we're going to study chemistry, and then 4 minutes later, now we're going to study history. It brings it all together in a more cohesive way. Not to say that that's wrong, it just didn't work for me. And it may work for and it does work for other people, and that's okay.
I think maybe, sorry,
Yeah.
I think maybe a point of reference that we should consider is that people are different and we shouldn't have one fixed educational system that probably can't cater to the needs of a very diverse range of people.
So the question is, how do you understand that difference, and how does that choice happen for people? It's a really good question. And how do you know what your learning style is when you're 3 years old? So I don't know the answer to that in terms of what makes the most sense. If there's a pathway there for how you learn and being respectful of it, definitely something worth exploring.
Aw.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Coco.
Thank you.